The Batman has finally arrived in theatres, and there's a lot to break down in Matt Reeves' latest film. It's the first of a potential trilogy, one that will introduce much more of the Rogues Gallery, and one that will continue to develop Robert Pattinson's Caped Crusader. I'm going to be breaking down the plot and explaining the ending and story details that take place to help you guys put together a much greater picture of this first Batman film. But as a warning, this analysis will contain spoilers, so if you do happen to be someone who hasn't seen The Batman yet, then I would recommend watching this video after you've seen it. If you want to keep up to date on all of my Batman videos coming over the next few weeks, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. Also, feel free to check me out on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram at Cortex Videos, which is all linked in the description below. But without further ado, let's dive into Matt Reeves' The Batman Explained. Matt Reeves has produced something special with The Batman, a comic book year one tale, but also a more unique superhero film than any hardcore fan of The Dark Knight could have hoped for going in. The way Reeves directed Robert Pattinson's Caped Crusader, with anxiety and through an introspective lens, is genius at times to say the least, and it really guides the movie to greater heights. But how does the story, ending, and loose ends all come together to bring us this cinematic epic? The Batman isn't just about Bruce Wayne or Batman, as the other primary characters such as Catwoman, the Riddler, Penguin, and Alfred all have interweaving stories of their own connected to the main plots. So let's break down everything that took place in The Batman 2022. So in Matt Reeves' film, Gotham is the most lawless version we've seen on the big screen, but it's also a metropolis that's on the verge of a mayoral race that at least offers some hope for change in the aftermath. But the majority of the plot very much explores this Gotham underbelly right from the opening, showing us that there's going to be a lot of exploiting on the part of one particular adversary. In particular, Paul Dano's The Riddler is taking aim at the corrupt institutions that hold the city together, picking off targets that will suck the Caped Crusader in and make it clear that this will eventually become more personal as the events stack up. But the movie opens with Riddler's first target, the current mayor Don Mitchell Jr., and the murder itself feels like it was taken out of a horror film. After creeping on the mayor and watching his family affairs, the villain finds his way into his apartment, waits behind him as he watches the news, and eventually attacks him using a carpet bolster. Something a lot of cosplayers I'm sure will be buying this upcoming Halloween. In an instant, we are introduced to someone who conveys a darker reflection to Batman, creeping in the darkness and striking unexpectedly in the name of vigilante justice. But this first killing is what brings in Robert Pattinson's Batman and Jeffrey Wright's James Gordon, leaving an opening to exploit the murdered mayor's hidden activities. While the Riddler leaves them photographic evidence on a USB drive with the mayor's bloody thumb attached to the end as a key, that evidence reveals that he's been having an affair with a young woman. But he also sends the images to the press, letting everyone else in on the corrupted people of power he kills, setting in motion a string of more brutal murders that reveal more secrets about them. Quite the gripping opening if you ask me, one that promises a deeper dive into the people Batman strives to take down, but of course, things aren't as simple as just taking down the bad guy, because he's in on it too. And this really is an eye-opening moment for our protagonist, as the real criminality in the city doesn't just lie in your average mugging, it's further with the people of enormous power that use their power and wealth to keep the rest of the city poor. With everyone now turning all their eyes to the Riddler, it's not long before he kills again, with the Commissioner Pete Savage being his next target. He sends a disturbing video message of Savage being killed using a rat torture device, and this quite metaphorically leads to Bruce figuring out that there's a rat in charge of the corruption that Riddler aims to exploit. The Riddler specifically names this rat the Rataalada, known as the Rat with Wings. It was a cool marketing push by Warner Brothers to actually have this name be a website leading into the film where you could solve the Riddler's riddles to reveal a piece of artwork or an image from the film. And not to mention, it gets even more meta later on, with Batman literally going on this website to solve a riddle himself. But coming back to current affairs, it soon turns out that the young girl who'd been having an affair with the previously killed mayor at the seedy Iceberg Lounge was actually Selina Kyle's best friend, or maybe even lover, Anika. She's soon shown on TV to everyone in Gotham thanks to the investigating work of Batman and Gordon. And while Selina tries to protect her, it's not too long before she disappears, and this is what forms the connection between the Bat and the Cat, with Batman wanting to help her find her missing friend. Catwoman discovers that her friend has been spending time at 44 Below, the so-called club within a club at the Iceberg Lounge, somewhere which we learn Selina has had a heartbreaking connection to while she was young. But more on that reveal later. But yes, 44 Below is essentially a club which houses the extreme rich so that they can get or do anything they want away from the law that fights to keep hold of the city. And you get a sense that these mobsters have had a huge hand in a lot of the other organisations around the city too, most notably the GCPD. It becomes obvious to us that Selina's friend Anika has been kidnapped because of the things she knows during her time with ex-Mayor Mitchell about the operations of his campaign and the people he really works under. And it's this that makes it clear to us that Selina will do everything to help find her, all while Batman is trying to hunt down the Riddler. As a reflection of the poor that the city preys on, Catwoman was not as lucky as Bruce, as she has spent most of her life fighting for herself on the streets of the city, helping the strays. She is driven and desperate to save her friend. But more heartbreak comes Selina's way as Batman and Catwoman discover Anika dead, yet another victim of corruption, while looking into Colin Farrell's Penguin and his role in the dominant mob. Revenge is the option she has, and something Selina has to overcome or be taught by Batman, someone who also went through similar feelings, and ones that currently could send him down a disturbing path. So it's truly a season of corruption in Gotham City, and Batman, Catwoman and the Riddler are all imposing their own kinds of justice. This does lead into quite the sequence of ferocious imagery too, with Batman chasing down Penguin in a highway scene, ultimately toppling the Penguin and bringing him back to Gordon for a duo of questioning. While the grassroots political candidate for the role of mayor, Bella Real, reminds Bruce at the funeral of the ex-mayor that he doesn't really do much for this city, as the current wane of power, it seems the world has not forgot what his parents did for the city. But this is exactly the point where the whole story becomes very much focused, and we figure that both plotlines, one with Catwoman searching or getting revenge for her friend with the events of the Iceberg Lounge, and one with Batman pursuing Riddler's exploitation of the city's corrupt, is that they are all connected. And it comes through Riddler forcing the vigilante to examine more closely his family's legacy. He aims in at his father Thomas Wayne, unearthing his failed campaign for mayor and his ongoings with the Renewal Project as part of that run. He had put millions into this program in the aim to help the poorest people of Gotham, including orphan Edward Nashton, who felt he failed and looks at Bruce as the lucky rich kid who didn't face the same kind of failed promise. And it was the attention of this program that brought the press to his door, including someone connected to the previous mob boss Sal Maroney. We get a surprising reveal here that involves Bruce's mother, Martha Wayne, being a member of the Arkham family, which included her suffering with mental health issues and ultimately her known death. She was sent to a psychiatric facility, which was something that Thomas Wayne didn't want the press to know, and his friend Falcone had a member of the press killed to keep it hush. Speaking of hush, there is a reference to that by Riddler during one of his creepy videos, and I will be going into things like this in my biggest questions video, which serves as a companion one to this later in the week. But back to the main plot, the Riddler ultimately uses this as his force against the Waynes, something that would prove that they are just as corrupt as his previous victims, with the ex-mayor and Savage. It's the emotional tug that the film needed as it reached its climax, and something that serves as a moment of identity crisis for Batman, someone who holds his parents to high regard. Riddler is now making Bruce his final target, and it all begins to hit home when he sends a bomb to the very gothic Wayne Manor, one that is only meant to be opened by Bruce himself. And this is of course opened by Alfred, leading to a near-death moment in which his butler is hospitalized. However, while Bruce would be self-righteous to not address the corruption within his own family walls, Alfred convinces him from his hospital bed that his father didn't care about his run for mayor, and that his actions weren't to preserve or bump his status of power. Thomas Wayne was focused on keeping Martha's secret so that she wouldn't be exploited by the press, and while he did want the help from Falcone, his intention wasn't to kill a journalist as the mob boss had ordered. Alfred may not be in the film as much as I wanted him to, but he becomes a vital part of the motivation with this talk, restoring Bruce's moral and giving us a deeper connection between them and the legacy that they want to keep standing. So that leaves us with one big question: who is the Rataalada, or the rat with wings, that Riddler aims to exploit in all of this corruption? Well, that all builds from Bruce's father's renewal project, as after his and Martha's death, the powerful elites began to use the money from this very program to build their own funds. Sal Maroni was a primary suspect within this moment of corruption, but greed soon took over and he was overthrown from power, standing as a metaphor for the attaining of power by the individual dominators in Gotham. And it was the Rataalada who took out Maroni, seemingly setting up the structure of power in this story. So it makes sense that the mystery rat would then be Carmine Falcone himself, seeing this whole situation as a tool to build his power over Gotham. He had the mayor, district attorney, and Gotham police commissioner all working for him, and that's exactly why the Riddler was exploiting what he was. The sort of moment that makes you sympathise with the Riddler and mainly all of our other main characters who have become the people they are because of this corruption. Bruce becomes a vigilante because of his parents' death at the hands of criminals that are poor citizens convinced to do this under the fist of a controlled grisly environment. Selina becomes Catwoman because of the revenge she's driven into, thanks partially to the doings of her own illegitimate father Falcone. And Riddler is a villain that has been through it all when it comes to trauma and suffering at the hands of the powerful and their corrupt dealings. It's a grim situation, but it connects all of the plot threads to this mystery and sets up for a final act of action, death, aftermath, and the final stage of Riddler's plan. Anyway, Selina Kyle goes to see Falcone and figures out that it was him that ordered Anika's death, leading to her almost killing him in an act of revenge. Like most of the main players, you understand their actions and motives, and it's understandable why Selina tries to kill him, because like Batman and Edward, her real parents aren't around. And killing her illegitimate father is the climax of 20 years of pain she has felt. He abandoned her mother and killed her best friend. And although Batman eventually stops her from shooting him, that doesn't allow Falcone to get away with all the corruption he's been involved with, because outside of the Iceberg Lounge, the Riddler seemingly kills him with a rifle shot from his apartment. Yes, the Riddler has been watching this from right outside the building where all the corruption stems from. Is it bad on the GCPD for not knowing this? Probably not, because who would have made that their first target in finding the Riddler? I guess Edward is really just as smart as we thought he was. And Falcone's death is where the film comes to its concluding act, one that unmasks the final step of Riddler's plan. What the key lesson of the Batman's ending is really leaning towards is how Batman is still learning as he goes along. Yes, the Riddler being a brutal murderer is a huge problem to Gotham in the current situation, but with the problems of the city situating around the people in power, what does Bruce Wayne become? Especially with his conflicting state surrounding the events of the past. The future of the city and Batman's soul is essentially on the line, and Riddler makes this crystal clear after he turns himself in at a coffee shop, revealing his true face and confronting Batman in one of my other favourite scenes from the film. At the GCPD, the Riddler talks one-on-one with the Caped Crusader, and we learn more about the mysterious Edward Nashton. Bringing the whole story together, we learn of the secrets of him being a kind of disturbing reflection of Bruce Wayne, whether that be their orphaned origins, with Bruce getting to spend his parentless youth living with wealth, or the Riddler left living at an underfunded orphanage where rats would bite kids' faces, and that at least one baby would die due to the cold. So he essentially helped form the Riddler, inspiring the serial killer to become a vigilante. But the film does make it clear that Batman doesn't want to be Riddler's friend at this certain point. And while the Riddler is now held at Arkham Asylum, he's not ready to pack it in and leave the plan he set out in the cold to be forgotten about. No, the Riddler wants to teach Gotham a lesson, and it's on this very night that the city is facing its election night, giving him a big reason to end it all with a bang. It's this particular night where newly elected Bella Real is promising to the civilians to clean up the corrupted city. What she and Batman doesn't know is that Riddler is about to unleash the last act of his plan. Throughout the film, we see him talking to followers online, around only 500 subscribers to be more specific, and these followers include those who are ready to mask up and attack the people of Gotham attending Bella Real's event. But these followers will only come into play after Riddler's planned explosives along the seawall of Gotham go off. As the election night celebrations begin, the bombs blow, stunning Gotham, and within a few minutes the city is flooded. A lot of people are forced into the city's own version of Madison Square Garden for safety and shelter. And then the Riddler's goons, all dressed up in his attire, can come in and shoot at the trapped civilians within, also aiming at Bella Real herself. It all seems like we're heading for a brutal massacre, but of course, it becomes a moment that Batman can really rise up to become the hero the city needs him to be, and thankfully he does show up. The Riddler fails to realise that his plan has actually made Batman more resilient to fight back and become the Caped Crusader we know. After being shot by one of his goons, Catwoman joins the fight and they both take down the remaining of Riddler's followers. The bigger part of this ending though is the effect it will leave on the city and what the future holds for its people and the potential rising forces of power. While Gotham is still mostly underwater, Batman rises to become a symbol of hope for the city rather than the fearsome figure of vengeance that most people in the city saw him as leading up to that point. Gotham is still under the threat, of course, because there are those that can capitalise on the weakness of the city, whether it be Penguin or more foes that are yet to come into the light. So the Batman is needed more than ever. And what we learn from this conclusion is that Bruce is not fully at that point to be the hero it needs yet. He may be on that path, but Bruce is more conflicted as a person than he was at the beginning. With his father turning to Falcone in a time of need, it really shakes his mindset surrounding criminality in the city. And this is really where the next few films are going to pick up from, hopefully building on the current state of mind Bruce is in, and not just skipping to him becoming the Batman we know he will eventually become. It touches on Batman's true origins and really allows the next films in this potential trilogy to really flesh out but also challenge the Caped Crusader, leading to him becoming the symbol. And Gotham will need Batman because one particular villain is about to enter from the city's cracks, alongside the foes that are coming into their own through the events of this first film. In Arkham Asylum, Riddler is saddened by the failure of his plan, but he is situated in a cell next to the very person who could help him raise the threat of violence in future films. And that is none other than the Joker, played by Barry Keoghan. It's hard to see what he actually looks like here, but what we can see is parts of his makeup and what looks to be scars around his mouth. From what I could see, it looks like his mouth was ripped open and the makeup he had on was quite patchy, but this is really just serving as a tease for him down the line. His demented laugh is more obvious though, and this is something I think the actor might have to work on as he grows into the character in sequels. But over the exchange of conversation between Riddler and the Joker, we learn that they scheme to break out of Arkham and build on the opportunity that has arisen from Gotham to be taken. Riddler has now got a friend, but it should be at least a few years before we see their plan come to light. I really hope they don't do the Joker in the second film and really build his character up and plant more seeds leading into maybe a final film, but I guess we'll just have to see where it goes from here. It's probably the one scene I don't love in the film, but it still excites me to see what Reeves will do with his take on Gotham in the sequels. Also, there is a brief post-credit scene in which the word goodbye is typed out on screen in green Riddler font, along with a cryptic question mark and Rataalada flashing on screen. So this clearly isn't the end for this version of the Riddler or the world that Reeves has kicked off. But before we did get to the end of the credits, The Batman does end with a series of scenes for the main characters, and it's one that really puts them on the path they seem to be going down. What I loved was that The Batman still feels like its own complete story, but by ending on a new path for these central figures, it opens up this world to be explored even more so. The cleanup of Gotham has begun with Bella Real surviving the incident at Gotham Square Garden and promising to fix the broken city. And there is then, of course, the sense of threat from the Rogues Gallery, with Penguin seemingly now becoming the next mob boss to rise up, and probably doing so in the Iceberg Lounge. And then there's Batman, whose mission is about to continue. Yes, a part of him wants to go off with Selina, who ends the film leaving Gotham for Bloodhaven nearby, but we learn that he is committed to try and make the city a better place. They end parting ways on their cycles, with Catwoman leaving the city and Bruce staying behind to save Gotham. But that was my video explaining the plot and ending for Matt Reeves' The Batman. Like I said in my spoiler-free review the other day, this film is really one of my favourite comic book films of all time, and after watching it again, I'm definitely sticking by that. The events of this film act as an individually great story, yet one that opens up the world of Gotham to be explored in sequels and spin-offs. I'm excited to see what Matt Reeves will do going forward, but he started off his potential trilogy with a bang. But I do hope this breakdown did help some of you guys understand the events and smaller details a bit better, and overall, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the film, so don't forget to let me know down below in the comment section. Like I said before, I will be doing a follow-up to this video discussing things I haven't addressed and answering the biggest questions you may have after leaving this film. I will also be doing multiple topical videos and essays in the coming weeks, so keep a lookout for whenever I post and make sure you don't miss any of it. But for more breakdowns and content on The Batman during its release, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.